and we lose 1,566 people to overdose. Now that was in 2017. I'm sure that number's up by now, but and we have lost 2,216 people to COVID this year. So again, I'm not downplaying COVID. It is a killer. It is a significant player in the medical world, but again, it's a known player now. We know it. We know who it affects. We know who to protect. And when you look at this, it's not the super killer we thought it was going to be, okay? And we didn't know in March. None of us knew, and it took a few months for us to figure that out. But I think this summer and on, we have started to realize it's not this super killer. It's not just running rampant through everybody and just annihilating you regardless of health status and gender and age. Okay, we've come to know that it's a lot like other viruses, especially the flu. It in the population that's very susceptible. They are more likely to die. You know, if you have a lot of other medical problems. But other than that, when you get the disease, you could certainly get sick, but you're going to recover. Okay, so again, when you look at Kentucky. You have 10,000 a year that die of cancer, 10,000 of heart disease, 8,000 people die of tobacco-related problems, 1,500 about die of drug overdose, and 2,216 have died of COVID. So again, I mean, drug overdose and COVID are really close, right? Really close. So when you look at 100 people, you lose, when you look at, when you just look at the general population in Kentucky, you lose 20, out of 100 people, you lose 22 people to heart disease. Out of 100 people, you lose 22 people to cancer in Kentucky. You lose 17 people to tobacco-related products in Kentucky. You lose, and then when you actually look at COVID for Kentucky, okay, actually you have to go to the 10,000s, all right? So really you lose, for 10,000 people in Kentucky, you lose 4 to COVID, all right? So the percentage is 0.04%. All right, so you actually have to go out to the 10,000s. You have to gather 10,000 people, and you lose 4 people to COVID, where for heart disease, cancer, and tobacco, you know, actually, forget that. I am so sorry. Again, I don't want to confuse people, all these numbers. Forgive me. I was using 10,000 for everything. So for 10,000 people, please forgive me. For 10,000 people, you lose 22 people to heart disease, you lose 22 people to cancer, you lose 17 people to tobacco, and you lose 4 people to COVID, and you lose 3 people to drug overdose. Okay, so forgive me, please. I'm really trying not to confuse people. There's so much out there. I really want this not to confuse people. But again, so when you look at all the population in Kentucky, all right, we have 4.5 million. So when you look at 10,000 people at a time, okay, so take 10,000, you lose 22 to heart disease and cancer, you lose 17 to tobacco-related problems, you lose 4 to COVID, and you lose 3 to drug overdose. Now that 3 is from 2017, so my guess would be that's probably going to be more, but that's just the numbers I could find. And again, the idea is, let's put this in perspective of what we're dealing with, okay? Because the issue becomes, is it worth shutting everything down, right? So again, it's not that it's not real. This is a real disease, and if you've had someone affected, if you've lost someone from it, it's very emotional and it's very heart-wrenching. But at the same time, we have to look at the facts and realize, is it worth destroying our economy, putting people into poverty, completely destroying and disrupting our children's lives for an entire year, increasing the suicide rate and the depression rate and the anxiety rate and all the other health problems that have come along with all this? Is all that worth it for these numbers? And I would have to argue no. I would have to argue we know who is susceptible. We know who that 1 out of 100 is. We know who that 4 out of 10,000 are. So in Kentucky, for every 10,000 people, we lose 4 people to COVID, and we lose 22 people to heart disease, 3 people to drug overdose, 1 right behind COVID, right? But we know how to protect those 4. We know where they are. We know where we can find them. We can find them in the population who has health risks, in the population who has health issues, in the population who has immune problems. That's where we're going to find most of those 4. And so we can protect those and open our society. And that leads me to the next thing. you know, we hear about all these numbers, oh, all these cases, positive cases, right? But yet the death rate's dropping, and we know how to protect those people because we know who's susceptible to die. But the other issue that's never talked about is the recovery rate. So we hear about the positive rate, but we never hear about the recovery rate. Now, these numbers I got from the CDC in September. Okay, so these come from September, late September into October, and they looked at the recovery rate. And the CDC came out with a number, and they said that 94% of people who die of COVID have other medical problems, okay? That doesn't mean that COVID wasn't a player. All right, COVID is going to be a player in those people. So if you're on dialysis, then you are more likely to have a shortened lifespan. Or if you are on hospice from cancer, you are, by that nature, have a shortened lifespan. But then if you get COVID, it will shorten that even more. So maybe if you were supposed to live 6 months or, you know, a year, we don't know, right? God knows. You know, that's the other thing about all this is God knows. But I'm just doing medical science, and medicine would say, and we know doctors don't know, right? We're not God, but a doctor may say to you, you have 3 months to live, right? And you go home with hospice, and then you contract COVID, certainly that 3 months might turn into 4 weeks because now the COVID becomes a player, okay? So certainly COVID is a player. We're not saying it's not, and that's why we have to protect those people because it is a player, all right? And I really want people to realize that it is, but it is in a certain population, and that's, now that we know that, we just have to be able to balance these things. I mean, we have to get back to balance, and there's a lot of non-balance here and things that aren't making sense. All right, because we know a lot to make a sense of a lot of this. And so, again, COVID is a player, but what the CDC was saying in that 94% was that 94% of people who succumb to COVID have a lot of other comorbidities. And when I say comorbidities, I mean health issues. We also know from those numbers from the CDC that they broke it down to recovery rate. Okay, so you don't hear a lot about recovery rate. You hear a lot about positive numbers, and everyone seems to be harping on the positive numbers, but that's just not really a scientific number to look at. It's not it doesn't translate into any meaningful data just to have positive cases floating out there and making decisions based on positive cases. It's not meaningful. All right, but what is meaningful is recovery rate, death rate, the population that's susceptible. What population do we see dying? Who is dying from this, and how can we fix that? All right, those are meaningful numbers, and I think we have those. And what the CDC came up with in September when they were evaluating this data is that from the ages of 18 and under, you have a 99.9% recovery rate. Okay, now you can look that up yourself. Please do. I really encourage everybody on here, if you want to save this, watch it, and then go to these sites yourself, because the more informed we are ourselves, the more we just look at these numbers ourselves. Again, science is numbers. Okay, science is not opinions. Science is numbers. So go look at these yourself. But the CDC said 18 years of age and under 18, you have a 99.9% recovery rate. Okay. When you look at 18 to 70, which that's actually a big age span, that includes your older population. I'm kind of in there myself. I'm going to be 50. But so 18 years old to 70 years old, their recovery rate was 99.5 to 99%. Recovery rate, okay? That should be something to celebrate. That should be something to take the fear out of everybody, okay? The recovery rate. So are you going to get sick? You most certainly can, all right? Will it kick your butt? It may. Will you be in bed for a week? Most likely. Maybe. Maybe feel really bad, but you will recover, okay? So that fear of death, which as a Christian we shouldn't have anyway, but that fear should be taken away from us, because what we know is most people are going to recover. And honestly, for all ages, all comers, health disease, no health disease, health problems, no health problems, the recovery rate is 97 to 99%. 97 to 99%, and that's from the CDC. That's the recovery rate for everybody. And we know who those 3% are. That's the thing. Now we know who those 3% are. Those 3% of all ages who are going to succumb are people with health problems, more than likely. Now, again, are there outliers? Of course there are. Are there going to be exceptions to the rule? Yes. Are there going to be things that maybe we didn't know someone had an underlying health issue and we didn't know it and they got COVID and And so it looks like they just died of COVID, but maybe there was something else going on. So yes, there are always going to be outliers. This is medicine. There are always going to be things that are, out of the norm. But for the vast, vast majority, that 3% out of that 97 to 99% of everybody recovers. And that 3% is mostly going to be made up of people who are elderly and have health issues. They already have health issues. So that's beautiful. That should be something to be celebrated. I don't know why that's not being shouted from the housetops. I don't know why that's not being touted and told that there is good news here. There is good news that this is a real virus, and unfortunately, we are likely to, since it's a novel virus, we have the chance of, if we get exposed, we're going to get it, because until you get it one time, you're not going to have immunity. Now, it's just like the flu. Once you get the flu, then you have immunity. Your body builds up immunity, and you're less and less likely to get the flu, even though you're exposed. And the coronavirus will do the same thing. Over time, that the more people get exposed, we're going to develop immunity, and we're going to get less and less sick. Now, it doesn't mean I've gotten the flu more than once before, because there's different flus, there's different strands, they mutate. That's the slick thing about viruses. That's why it's so hard for us to cure them. But we will build up an immunity. But in the beginning, from what we can understand, and of course that may change too, but from what we can understand now, it doesn't appear that many or any of us had an immunity to this. None of us had seen it before. So it was an inevitable thing. If you got exposed, you were more than likely going to get it. Then the problem was, how sick were you going to get? And now what we know is many people are asymptomatic, or many people do things like lose their taste and smell, and that's it, or maybe feel a little cruddy for a couple days. Some people, not just women, I'm used to dealing with women, but people just get knocked on their butt for a week to 10 days. But then most people are going to recover. Again, when you're under 18, that recovery rate is 99.9%. When you're 18 to 70, that recovery rate is 99.5 to 99.9. But again, 99% if you just want to be, but 99.5 in the age of 18 to 70. And then in all age groups, it's 97% to 99% is the recovery rate of this thing. Okay, so that should be good news. That should really alleviate fear. That should mean we should be able to open up. Our businesses should be up and running. We should be up and running. We know who that 3% for the most part is, and we should know we should put things in place to take care of them, to protect them, but then let the rest of us life go back, because the cure at this point is worse than the disease based on these numbers. Based on these numbers, the cure is worse than the disease. And putting people into poverty and disrupting people's lives and taking away their freedoms, it does not seem to be warranted based on these numbers. And the other thing I want you to all pay attention to, and you have to be very, very, God tells us to test the spirits, right? So not everything said is true. And so I think one other thing that I have noticed is when I got on the CDC and I was trying, I think the CDC came out with they're not tracking the flu as much. And so it's hard to say what those numbers are because when COVID happened, we kind of stopped really paying attention to the flu and tracking the flu. And there was a recommendation even to just not track the flu this year. But when I looked at the numbers they were talking about the rise in hospitalizations. We know that we're also in flu season, right? We're in pneumonia season. This is kind of the season for that. And when I looked at those numbers, they are actually combining. So when they give you that number of hospitalizations, many places, including the CDC, and again, look this up, they are combining pneumonia, the flu, and coronavirus. They're combining those three causes of hospitalizations and putting them into one number. So again, that's very dangerous because for one, corona, we're still in the process of looking at it and trying to define it, I thought. And so why would you not want pure coronavirus data, right? If you are still trying to define this virus and define what it does and define its course and define how it works and when it goes away, why would you not keep it separate from everything else and still track everything else? Because that's how you decide, right? But we have combined it with pneumonia and flu and really quit tracking the flu. So basically, if you have symptoms of any of those things, then you're kind of put in this group and it's considered a hospitalization. But there's those three things together. So that, I think that's something to question. And I think that's where we have to be astute, and we have to be gentle as doves, but yet still wise. And we have to be looking at what data are they giving us, and what is it compared to, and what are they using? Because again, if you're going to combine those three and then talk about hospitalizations, it's very hard to know what is what. But and I think, having said all that, I hope it's been helpful. I was trying to keep a train of thought. I was trying not to get lost in the numbers, and I just want to be helpful. I think God gives us a command to love our neighbor, and when we love our neighbor, we need to share truth, and the true truth is Jesus. And I think in the end, if you're a Christian, this shouldn't make you afraid at all. Because when you're a Christian and you're truly following the Lord, you know that your steps are ordered by Him, your days are numbered by Him. You're not leaving here one breath before He wants to take you, and you're leaving the way He wants to take you. And there's nothing that no one else can affect that. COVID can't affect that. The president can't affect that. A governor can't affect that. Your parents can't. Nobody. When you are walking with the Lord, He has your life in His hands, and He has ordered your steps, and your days are numbered, and you're going to breathe every last breath He wants you to breathe, and when that last breath is taken, it's going to be taken the way He says it's going to be taken. And so there is no fear in this. That doesn't mean we're not responsible. That doesn't mean we don't do our part. I'm not saying that. But it also means this fear shouldn't be. And if you're not a Christian, then come. Let us tell you about Jesus. Let us tell you why you don't have to fear. Why we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be afraid. God promises us He's healed our diseases. He will fight for us. He puts down our enemies. No arrow formed against us, no weapon formed against us will prosper. And He's got our days numbered. And so the only person that can affect your life is you. You just reject the Lord. You reject His truth, and then you're susceptible to other things. But certainly when you're walking with the Lord, there's no fear in this. And certainly that's reassuring. And then the numbers support that. There is no fear in this. The recovery rate, again, under 18, 99.9%. 18 to 70, 99.5 to 99.9%. All age groups, 97% to 99% recover. Okay, we've learned that the 3% that aren't going to recover are more likely going to be your elderly with health problems. So health problems is the bigger issue at any age. Health problems is the big issue, and it's significant health problems, diabetes and high blood pressure and bad high blood pressure, like vascular disease, not just high blood pressure, but vascular disease and diabetes, morbid obesity, COPD, really bad asthma, cancer, you're on dialysis, you're on chemotherapy, those kinds of things. Those major issues, immune system issues, can make you susceptible. And so we need to protect those people. We certainly need to protect those people. But now that we know that, we can do that. We can put things in place that protect those populations, and yet then allow the rest of us, because the other things are killing us, killing the healthy population, the poverty, the inability to open up small business, the inability to run a small business, the inability for our kids to go to school, the inability for us to exercise our freedoms. All of those things are way far worse than what we're seeing the coronavirus can do to us, with those kind of recovery rates. And again, I tried to put in perspective where the loss is. So what you can see is heart disease and cancer are killing way more people than corona. And again, not that COVID's not important, but heart disease and cancer are killing more people than corona. And so is tobacco use. Tobacco-related deaths are way higher than COVID. And drug overdoses right behind COVID in Kentucky. So when you put it in perspective that way, it just didn't play out to be this super killer that we thought it would be. And we didn't know in March. Nobody knew. But now as the data comes, and we can observe as ourselves, so you don't have to be a doctor or a nurse practitioner to observe your community and see when you know people who died or people who got it. You may know people who got it and got sick, but they recovered. And when you know people who died, if you really look into it, you probably see they had some health issues. And so we can observe that for ourselves, but the encouraging thing is the data from the CDC supports what we're seeing, supports the fact that most people are still walking around healthy. Our streets are not lined with just ungodly amounts of dead people of all ages, of all health things. So we see that most people are still walking around, and most people are still doing fine, and most people are still healthy. And we see that if we know people who have the virus, and by now ever so many people have been tested, that we at least know people who tested positive, but most of those people we know recovered. And when we do know people who died, and typically there's health issues there. And again, I'm not downplaying that, because it's emotional and it is hard. I mean, death is just hard. And I pray that you know that if you've suffered a loss, I pray that you know that those people are in heaven with the Lord. And that's another thing for Christians, is to up our ante here and be sharing the gospel, because we have a new player on town. We have a new player in the field that's taking people. So it's not that it's real, and it is killing people, but it's just not the extent we thought. It's not the horrible unknown super killer that we thought it would be. It acts a lot like the flu. The same population that's susceptible to the flu is susceptible to this. Most people, if they get sick, they're going to get very sick, but they're going to recover. And so I think, I think we know those things now. And so I think the cure that we've imposed is more risky than the virus. And I think that the treatment has, and in medicine, we stop a study based on that. There's a big study everyone knows about, the WHI study, right? And why did that study get stopped? That study got stopped because we thought estrogen would treat heart disease. And when we learned that it was actually creating heart disease, we stopped the study. That's medicine. So this cure that we say, this shutdown, these lockdowns, these no school, it's worse than the disease. So it's time to stop that stuff. It's time to write our government officials, our representatives, mine's Daniel Elliott, and write them and let them know, do our own research, do our own homework, and make our politicians accountable to real science instead of everyone just throwing that word around. Look at the numbers, see the numbers, look at the cases in your county, look at the deaths in your county, look at the percentage, see who is affected, and then be able to make our politicians accountable for that to help us not make the cure worse than the actual disease, which is where I think we are. And I don't understand that. I mean, I think these numbers are there. They're for everybody to see. And, again, when you look at, and then, another thing, look at Switzerland. Again, look at other countries. Really, we're supposed to be getting data from everywhere. So if you look at Switzerland, they are the country that's about the size of Kentucky. Okay, so their whole country is about the size of Kentucky, but they have twice as many people. We have 4.5 million. They have about 8.5 million. So they have twice as many people in the country that's the size of Kentucky. All right, and when you look at them, for every 10,000 people, they have 5, and they never shut down. That's why I'm looking at Switzerland. They never shut down. From March, they never shut down. They've just continued to live life. All right, so they have 8.5 million people in the size of Kentucky. So you can imagine their population density is pretty good, right? There's not a lot of places for those people to go. You got twice as many people in the state of Kentucky. They never shut down. Out of 10,000 people, when you look at for every 10,000 people in Switzerland, they lost 5 deaths to COVID. For every 10,000 people in the United States, we've lost 8. So they've lost 3 less people than we do to COVID, and they never shut down, ever. So let that sink in. Switzerland, twice as many people in an area, the state of Kentucky. So huge population density, hard to get away from each other, right? Hard to social distance. And they never shut down. And out of 10,000 people, when you look at for every 10,000 people in Switzerland, they lost 5 to COVID. For every 10,000 people in the United States, we lose 8. So with all these lockdowns, all these shutdowns, okay? And again, those are big, broad, raw numbers, and sometimes you have to, even dissect those a little bit. But that's telling. I mean, that's a big telling thing that we should that we need to pay attention to, right? So again, I encourage you. I hope this was helpful. I want this to help alleviate fear. I want this to be encouraging. I want you to be able to shed some of that, shed some of that heaviness and that darkness, and realize that that just looking at positive cases isn't helpful, and it's creating fear, but it's not translating into real issues. So the number of positive cases isn't as important as the recovery rate and the death rate. How does this virus compare to the deaths that this virus has caused? How does this compare to other things? How does this compare to other reasons people die? And what we can tell is people are still dying. Just in Kentucky alone, you have 24 out of 10,000 that die of cancer, or 22 out of 10,000 that die of cancer and heart disease. You have 17 that die from tobacco-related things, and you have 4 people out of 10,000 that die from COVID, and 3 out of 10,000 that die from drug use. So, significantly other issues take Kentuckians' lives more than the COVID. And again, not that it's not important, not that it's not real, and certainly there are things that we know to do that we can to protect people, who are susceptible. So we know those things. We know the susceptible people. We should be able to put things in place, which I think we have. That's why our death rate, again, when you look at just positive cases in Kentucky and compare, so for every 100 positive cases, we had 2 deaths in the summer, and now we have 1 per 100 positive. And again, I think that's because we're learning how to protect the people who are susceptible. So the death rate's down, the recovery rate's amazing, and we know who really is a susceptible population, and we know how to protect them. So I think the rest of this has to really be reevaluated, and we're killing our economy and our children and our people, and putting people in poverty, and taking away freedoms, and it's not warranted, not based on the numbers. So again, I hope this helps. I wanted to bring this to you, and hopefully more people will speak up and help alleviate some of the burden and the darkness and the fear that seems to be unwarranted and being pushed, but not really supported by the numbers. So God bless you. Thank you for watching me. Yeah, I appreciate you all. I'll be praying for you all. Be praying for me. And we will get through this together with the help of the Lord. Okay, bye. Happy Saturday.